Hi, everybody. So let's go ahead and do some notes about energy flow and ecosystems. Energy flow in ecosystems. All right. So there's a couple big main ideas that I wanted to make sure you got down in your notebook, and then I want to talk about the different kinds of ecological pyramids so that you understand them and how they're different, and what they can possibly look like. So first major big thing, of course, is that we have the energy. All energy comes from the sun. All energy on Earth comes from the sun. Okay. Energy travels in one direction. Oops. One direction. Just like the band. It only travels in one direction from producers to consumers. Right, so up the food chain. So we could draw a picture of that. We have our sun. The energy goes to producer like a plant. Right? Then to consumer like a mouse. You guys know my ugly little mouse pictures by now. Okay, and then up the food chain to, for example, like a snake. This is my favorite example. You guys know this by now. And we'll just end it there, right? So the energy moves from the sun to the producer to the consumer and then up the food chain, right? So here's our primary consumer, our secondary consumer. Okay. And then when all of these things die, so when these things die, then the energy what's left goes to the decomposers. Okay, so a good thing to know. All right. So that's a sort of one basic thing, that the energy moves in one direction. So let's write in all caps here that energy, it flows in one direction. It does not get recycled. Energy is not recycled, but must constantly be added. So luckily for us, the sun shines on us every day, right? And so if the sun were to stop shining, then all of the Earth systems and the ecosystems on Earth would have to stop because we would not have energy to continue any longer. Okay, so big one, energy is not recycled but must constantly be added. Energy flows in one direction. Those are two major key ideas that we want to remember. All right. So we talked about food chains and food webs, and I feel like you guys are comfortable with those, so I'm not going to draw those on here. But I do want to talk about the different kinds of ecological pyramids. So when we're looking at ecological pyramids, there are three kinds. Two of them we did activities about in class so far. One of them we haven't talked about yet. So the first one that we did an activity about was the food chain game, and we did a little thing with energy pyramid. Okay, so energy pyramid is showing us the amount of energy that's stored at each level in an ecosystem, and it's always going to have a pyramid shape like this, where the base is way bigger than the other levels. Of course, we have our producer level, our primary consumer level, and our secondary consumer level. And in all of our energy pyramids, we always have the producers at the bottom, and we go up primary consumer, secondary consumer, and sometimes tertiary consumer, right? Depending on the pyramid. But an energy pyramid, it's showing, how much energy at each level. And the units here are usually going to be calories or kilocalories, right? So if we had 100 kilocalories at this lowest level, then you're going to have like a tenth of that at the level up, right? It's always going to decrease by 10 because of the 10% rule. And so if we had 100 here, we'd have 10 here and 1 here. Okay, because remember, we have that 10% rule where only 10% can move from one level to the next. Okay, so 10% of the energy is transferred. Make sure you guys can read. Yeah, okay. Is transferred. 90% is lost as heat to the environment. Okay, so that's an energy pyramid. And I'm actually going to switch papers here because I don't have enough space. And of course, I'm going to take pictures of this and put it up. So I'm going to switch papers on us. And we're going to look at the biomass pyramid, which we also looked at yesterday when we were doing our Hunger Games activity. So remember, biomass equals the mass of living things. And remember, mass is similar to weight. It's the amount of stuff that's, amount of matter that's in something. And we usually, measure it on a scale here on Earth. So you can kind of think of it as the weight as well. Okay, so that's the mass of living things. And if we're looking at a biomass pyramid, it's also always going to be pyramid shaped with the largest amount at the bottom. Okay. So that means if we were to weigh the producers in an ecosystem, they're always going to weigh more than the consumers above it. So if we were to look here at like kilograms, right? Then we would have way more kilograms here at the bottom than we would here at the top. And you're not necessarily going to get like the perfect little 10% rule numbers, but it's going to be around the same, around 10% rule kind of stuff, because basically it takes a certain amount of energy to build and maintain a certain amount of biomass, right? So you're going to have similar kind of pattern in the numbers as we did with the energy pyramid, okay? But the producers are always going to have bigger biomass than the consumers that are up the food chain from the producers. Okay. And then last, but definitely not least, the last kind of pyramid we want to talk about is called the pyramid of numbers. Okay, and this is basically shows the number of individuals. At each trophic level. Right? And so this is where we can get some interesting shapes. They're not always pyramids, okay? Now a typical pyramid of numbers would be a pyramid, right? So you would have like, you know, a lot of blades of grass compared to, you know, grasshoppers or whatever, right? So you might have, you know, 10,000 grass plants, right? And 1,000 grasshoppers and 100 mice or something like that. Okay, so your typical pyramid of numbers is going to still be a pyramid, but sometimes, because sometimes we can get some really huge producers, sometimes it looks more like a diamond shape, for example. So if you have like a really big oak tree, and then you've got some insects on the oak tree, and then maybe you have a bird that eats the insects, right? So you get this kind of interesting diamond shape because there's only one oak tree, right? So one oak tree, maybe there's 1,000 insects, and maybe there's 4 birds or something like that, right? So you get an like this interesting inversion at the bottom because this producer is really, really large. And then occasionally in what's called marine ecosystems, like in the ocean, you'll get it inverted like this as well, simply because like the producers get eaten so fast. They like they reproduce so quickly and get eaten so fast that like there's not that many of them at a given moment. Okay, so those are our 3 kinds of ecological pyramids that I wanted to go over with you guys that I thought you should have in your notebook. And the other thing that you might want to add to your notebook is vocab. Okay, and the vocab that we have for this unit or this topic about energy flow, we have like the whole idea of a producer or an autotroph, and these make their own food with photosynthesis. There are some really weird autotrophs that use this process called chemosynthesis, but it's such a very, very rare thing. It only happens like in under ocean volcanic vents that really, for the most part on Earth, like almost all producers are using photosynthesis. Then we have our consumer, also known as a heterotroph. And these must eat their food. So they eat other organisms in order to survive, right? So we got producer, autotroph, consumer, heterotroph. Oops, left off the H. Okay, producers, these are basically plants, right? So we got our plants, algae, phytoplankton. Consumer, this could be an animal, a fungus, fungi, and also different kinds of bacteria. Okay, so depending on what kind of bacteria it is, there's some bacteria that are producers, but most bacteria are actually consumers. So that's some vocab that you need to know. The other piece of vocab that I want to make sure I explain it, well, I think I've explained it already, but just want you to have it in your notebook. That's the whole idea of a trophic level. So this is the place on the food chain, right? Or in like an ecological pyramid, right? So that's the whole thing where you get producer, primary consumer, secondary consumer. And so if we're talking about trophic level, you're probably going to see that in the context of these kind of ecological pyramids, right? All right, I think we're good on these notes. I will post a picture of them in the Google Classroom, and hopefully everything is clear. I hate missing school. I hate not being there with you. So if you have questions, do send me a message on Remind. I am feeling kind of not great, so I might not respond immediately, but I will try my best. Thanks. Bye.